Imagine a massive modern cargo ship crossing the ocean. You know, the kind stacked incredibly high with thousands of those brightly colored shipping containers.
Oh yeah, they look so top-heavy, like they should just tip over at the slightest breeze.
Right. But what you don't see is deep down in the hull beneath the waterline. There are these massive tanks filled with thousands of tons of ballast water.
Ah, the hidden weight.
Exactly. That hidden, unglamorous, unseen weight is literally the only thing keeping the ship upright when a hurricane hits. I mean, if a captain focuses entirely on stacking the visible cargo and ignores the invisible ballast, that ship is going to capsize the moment the weather turns.
That is honestly a phenomenal way to visualize human character, because we spend an enormous amount of our energy stacking the visible cargo, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Our careers, our social media profiles, our public achievements. But we often completely neglect the hidden ballast. And then when a crisis hits, we're just shocked to discover how quickly we capsize.
Yeah, and building that crucial hidden ballast is exactly why we are so glad you're joining us for this deep dive today. We have a custom-tailored mission designed specifically for you.
We do. We're pulling from this fascinating stack of sources: ancient Hebrew texts, historical commentaries, modern behavioral psychology, to explore ancient wisdom that feels shockingly relevant right now.
We're diving into the timeless principles of humility, self-awareness, and relationship building found in the 27th chapter of Proverbs. Okay, let's unpack this because we live in a hyper-connected age that constantly demands self-promotion.
Relentlessly.
Right. We're told to build our personal brands, curate our digital lives.
Yeah.
Yet the sources we're looking at today offer a roadmap to real stability that completely flips our modern script upside down.
What's fascinating here is that this material isn't just, a random assortment of moral suggestions. It's a cohesive, interconnected psychological and spiritual framework.
It's an architecture.
Exactly. It demonstrates that strong character isn't a personality trait you're just born with. It's built layer by layer through very specific practices.
Practices like humility, taking honest feedback, and consistent diligence. It's basically a manual for filling up those ballast tanks so you can survive the storms.
It really is.
Let's jump right into the deepest end of the pool here, because the text immediately targets our relationship with the future. I mean, we all naturally want to secure our trajectory. We make 5-year plans.
Of course we do.
But the ancient writers aggressively challenge our ability to control tomorrow. They warn against boasting about the future simply because we have absolutely no idea what a single day might bring.
Right. And in the ancient agrarian world, that illusion of control was stripped away daily. A sudden shift in the wind could bring a swarm of locusts.
Wow,
Or a brief illness could devastate a family. You couldn't arrogantly claim you knew what next week would look like because the fragility of life was just undeniable.
Whereas modern society, with our insurance policies and algorithms, creates this very convincing illusion that we've engineered risk completely out of existence.
But the reality is we are just as fragile. We might not be looking out for locusts, sure, but a sudden shift in the financial markets.
Or unexpected corporate layoffs.
Exactly. Or a global health event. It can vaporize a 10-year career plan in an afternoon.
Yeah. Now, to be clear, the text doesn't advocate for chaos or negligence. It explicitly mentions in verses 11 and 12 that a prudent, wise person anticipates danger and prepares for it.
While a foolish person ignores the warning signs and suffers the consequences.
Right. So it's advocating for intense preparation, but absolute humility about the outcome.
And to take that a step further, that exact same humility is supposed to govern how we view our own reputation. There's this brilliant metallurgical analogy used in these ancient texts.
Oh, the crucible one.
Yes, they describe a crucible, the intense superheated furnace used to melt down raw silver and gold to separate the precious metal from the worthless impurities. The text states in verse 21 that a human being is tested in that exact same way by the praise they receive.
Okay, I have to push back on this concept just a little bit, particularly when we bring it into the modern workplace.
Sure, go ahead.
In today's economy, if you aren't optimizing your LinkedIn profile, actively networking, making sure your boss knows exactly what you achieved this quarter, you just become invisible.
That's the fear, yeah.
Isn't a certain level of self-promotion essentially a survival skill now? Like, verse 2 says, let another man praise you and not your own lips. But if you don't advocate for yourself, nobody else will.
That is the dominant modern philosophy, absolutely. But let's look at the mechanism behind the ancient warning. Why does it advise letting someone else's mouth praise you?
Because it looks arrogant otherwise.
Well, more than that. Self-generated praise is incredibly fragile and often reeks of insecurity. True, undeniable credibility is built when your actual output forces others to acknowledge your value. But the crucible analogy goes even deeper into human psychology. Praise isn't the reward for good character. Praise is the test of good character.
Wow. That reframes the entire concept of success. You're saying the heat of the furnace isn't a hardship, it's applause.
Precisely the opposite of what we usually assume. Think about what happens when someone is suddenly showered with accolades. Does it inflate their ego to the point of arrogance?
Do they start believing they're inherently superior to their peers?
Exactly. Or do they receive that praise with grounded gratitude, recognizing the mentors, the team, and the circumstances that helped them succeed?
So your reaction to a compliment burns away your social facade and reveals exactly what your core identity is resting on.
That's the crucible.
That makes the subsequent analogy about water incredibly poignant. Verse 19 points out that when you look into a perfectly still pool of water, it reflects your physical face back to you. In the same way, the text argues, the heart of a person reflects their true self. It's a call for deep, quiet self-reflection to ensure your internal motivations actually match that shiny external brand you've built.
And if we accept that our hearts are the true mirror of our character, we have to examine the things that distort that reflection.
The internal hazards.
Exactly. The text highlights several massive internal hazards in verses 3 and 4, but it zeroes in on one specific emotion as the most dangerous psychological weight a human can carry: envy.
The imagery used here is heavy. Literally. It says that carrying a massive stone is exhausting, and a bag of sand is a terrible burden, but the destructive wrath of a fool is heavier than both.
And then it drops the hammer.
It does. It asks, who can possibly stand before envy? It portrays envy not just as a bad mood, but as an overwhelming, crushing, unstoppable force.
The psychology of envy is insidious because it's a virus that feeds on itself. A physical stone has a fixed weight. You can eventually set it down.
But envy multiplies.
Right. Every time you look at what someone else has, your own life feels less adequate. The ancient writers observed that human desire is like a bottomless pit. Verse 20 famously notes that hell and destruction are never full, so the eyes of man are never satisfied.
The eyes are never satisfied. I mean, I can't think of a more devastatingly accurate description of scrolling through a social media feed.
Oh, it's spot on.
You swipe, you see someone's curated vacation, you feel a pang of resentment, and then you just keep swiping. You are literally feeding an endless hunger.
Which perfectly sets up the text's brilliant observation about honeycomb in verse 7.
Oh yeah, the full soul loathes a honeycomb.
Exactly. It notes that a person whose soul is totally full, someone overindulged and entitled, will eventually look at sweet honeycomb and feel disgusted by it.
But to a hungry, grounded soul, even something bitter tastes sweet.
It is a masterclass in the psychology of contentment. When we constantly consume, when our baseline expectation is luxury and immediate gratification, we destroy our capacity for joy.
The sweetest moments become boring.
Right. Cultivating a hungry soul means maintaining a posture of gratitude where you are deeply appreciative of the basics.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because as we transition into the daily application of these ideas, I am noticing a massive, glaring paradox in the source material.
Oh, what's the paradox?
Well, we started this deep dive by establishing that we cannot control tomorrow. The text practically orders us to let go of our arrogant assumptions about the future.
Right, boasting of tomorrow.
But then it pivots and demands that we obsessively manage our daily responsibilities. Verses 23 through 27 tell the reader to diligently know the state of their flocks, to look well to their herds.
And to carefully tend to their fig trees.
Yes, to ensure they have enough goat's milk to feed their household. So how do we reconcile this? Are we supposed to surrender the future, or are we supposed to aggressively plan for it?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it resolves into one of the most brilliant frameworks for human sanity ever written.
I'm listening.
The concept reconciling that paradox is stewardship. Stewardship requires you to focus with absolute intensity on the responsibilities placed directly in front of you today.
So your work, your family, your physical health, your local community.
Exactly. You pour your energy into tending the fig tree, but you do so while simultaneously acknowledging that you have absolutely no control over the rain, the soil temperature, or the ultimate harvest.
So it's separating the process from the outcome. I am responsible for the effort, but I am not the architect of the universe.
And doing that physically prevents envy, When your bandwidth is entirely consumed by taking excellent, diligent care of your own literal or metaphorical flocks.
You simply don't have the time or the emotional energy to stare over the fence and resent your neighbor's grass.
Precisely. Diligence is the ultimate grounding mechanism.
But maintaining that level of diligence and constantly checking our own egos is incredibly difficult to do in a vacuum. We all have massive blind spots.
Which naturally leads us into the text's profound insights on the necessity of external anchors. Specifically, the crucible of genuine friendship.
The ancient perspective on friendship is pretty rugged, honestly.
Yeah.
It completely rejects our modern tendency to surround ourselves with yes men.
Oh, completely. Verse 5 makes a shocking claim. It says that an open, painful rebuke from a friend is infinitely better than a love that is kept secret or hidden.
The phrase that jumped out at me from the research was faithful wounds. This is the wounds of a friend are faithful, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful.
It's a powerful image.
It really is. I immediately thought of having a truly excellent personal trainer, or like a hardcore gym buddy.
Okay, how so?
Well, if I am attempting to lift a massive weight and my form is completely compromised, a true friend is going to yell at me to stop. They're going to tell me my technique is garbage and I'm about to break my back.
Right.
That criticism is a wound. It hurts my pride, but it's a faithful wound that saves me from injury. An enemy is the person who stands there clapping, flattering my ego, and telling me I look incredibly strong right up until the moment my spine snaps.
That analogy captures the exact mechanism the ancient writers were describing. Flattery is incredibly dangerous because it anesthetizes us to our own flaws.
Yeah, verse 14 even humorously warns that if someone shows up early in the morning, loudly blessing and flattering you, you should treat it like a curse.
Because it's performative, it's empty. True friendship requires the courage to inflict a faithful wound and the humility to receive one.
Which leads to the most famous metaphor in this entire body of ancient wisdom in verse 17. Iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another.
We quote that all the time.
We do. But we usually forget that sharpening metal requires violent friction. It produces heat, it throws sparks, it actually strips away tiny layers of the metal itself. Real collaboration and mentorship aren't supposed to be comfortable.
No, they aren't. And that friction requires deep trust. You will only accept a spark-throwing critique from someone who has proven their loyalty over time.
Which is why the text issues a strong warning against constantly changing your social circles.
Exactly. Verses 8 and 10 compare a person who constantly wanders away from their home to a bird wandering from its nest. It advises valuing a near neighbor over a distant relative.
The physical and emotional proximity of a long-term community creates the necessary safety net for that honest, sharp feedback.
It's essential.
So what does this all mean? We've explored the necessity of giving up our arrogant control of tomorrow. We've looked into the mirror of our own hearts to identify the psychological weight of envy.
We've discussed the quiet diligence of tending our own fields.
And we've embraced the spark-throwing friction of true, honest friendship. But the sources we are analyzing today weren't just written as a secular self-help guide. They were written as theological documents.
Yes, they weren't. So how do all these very practical boots-on-the-ground behaviors weave together to strengthen our ultimate trust and relationship with God?
This raises an important question, and honestly, it's the fulcrum of this entire deep dive. Because in this ancient framework, there is no separation between the psychological and the spiritual.
Interesting.
These practical, everyday actions actually serve as a highly sensitive spiritual diagnostic tool. Let's break it down by looking at the first major theme, our relationship with time and provision.
Right. The idea of not boasting about tomorrow and letting go of the infinite scroll of envy.
Think about the spiritual mechanics of anxiety and envy. When we are consumed by anxiety about our 5-year plan, or when we are intensely envious of someone else's success, what are we actually communicating to the Creator? We are implicitly making an accusation. We are telling God that He got our story wrong. We are operating from a profound posture of scarcity.
Asserting that God's provision for us today is inadequate.
Yes, and therefore we must forcefully seize control of tomorrow. Wow, that fundamentally changes how I view stress. It's not just a physiological reaction. It's a refusal to surrender.
Exactly. When we actively practice the contentment we discussed earlier, when we train our hungry soul to find profound gratitude in the basics, we are fundamentally shifting our spiritual posture.
We are laying down the terrible, exhausting burden of trying to be the author of the universe.
Right. By accepting our own fragility, we create the necessary space to genuinely trust that God's daily provision is sufficient. You cannot experience divine peace while your hands are firmly gripped around the steering wheel of tomorrow.
That brings us to the second theme, the faithful wounds and the friction of human friendship.
Sure.
How does taking a harsh critique from a coworker or a spouse translate into a deeper relationship with the divine?
This is perhaps the most challenging spiritual mechanism in the entire text. It acts as a pipeline. Think about the nature of human ego. If our pride is so incredibly fragile that we build social fortresses around ourselves, surrounding ourselves with flatterers, immediately cutting off anyone who dares to point out a flaw, we are cultivating a hard, impenetrable heart.
We essentially make ourselves uncorrectable.
And if you are uncorrectable by a human being whom you can physically see and hear, how could you possibly be receptive to the quiet, internal conviction of a God you cannot see?
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought about it like that.
Human friendship is the training ground for divine relationship. The friction of iron sharpening iron isn't just about becoming better at your job. It is the actual process of spiritual sanctification.
So when you swallow your pride and say to a friend, "You are right, I was acting selfishly,"
You are exercising the exact same spiritual muscle required to repent and seek guidance from God. You are systematically dismantling the ego that separates you from the divine.
that is a staggering perspective.
Yeah.
It means every difficult conversation with a friend is an opportunity to soften our hearts toward God.
It is.
And that perfectly sets up the final piece of the puzzle, the diligence. Tending the flocks, managing the goat's milk, looking after the fig tree. On the surface, this reads like a primitive guide to estate management. But there is a massive spiritual engine driving this daily grind, isn't there?
There is, and it completely obliterates the modern wall we build between the sacred and the secular.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we tend to think that reading a spiritual text or attending a religious service is holy, while doing laundry, balancing a corporate spreadsheet, or changing a diaper is just life.
Right.
This text argues that the mundane is actually the profound.
Because it's rooted in the idea of stewardship we talked about earlier.
Yes. The text explicitly reminds the reader in verse 24 that wealth and crowns are temporary. You can't take them with you. Therefore, the logical conclusion is that you do not actually own anything.
Okay.
Your intellect, your current job, your financial resources, the people in your household, they are not your property. They are divine capital, temporarily entrusted to your care.
So it shifts our identity from owners to managers.
And that shift changes everything. When you view yourself as a manager of God's resources, tending your flock is no longer just a stressful obligation to keep yourself fed. It transforms into a physical act of worship.
So when you execute your daily tasks with quiet excellence, when you manage your family's resources with integrity, you are actively honoring the Creator who placed those specific responsibilities in front of you.
It is a daily, physical demonstration of faith. You are saying, I do not control the future, but I will faithfully honor you with the dirt and the seeds you have placed in my hands today.
It takes the absolute most boring, repetitive parts of our week and infuses them with immense sacred weight. Our character isn't built in the rare, glamorous moments of crisis. It is built in the thousands of tiny, uncelebrated moments of submitting our pride, accepting correction, and doing the work.
The invisible ballast water deep in the hull.
Which brings us to the end of an incredibly profound journey today. We started by looking at the illusion of control, learning that letting go of our boastful assumptions about time is the first step toward actual wisdom.
We stared into the reflective water of our own hearts, identifying the exhausting, heavy virus of envy.
We stepped into the refining, spark-throwing crucible of genuine friendship, learning to embrace the faithful wounds that cure our egos.
And finally, we saw how all of this practical, psychological wisdom acts as a spiritual diagnostic, proving that surrendering our anxiety, accepting correction, and diligently managing our daily chores are actually the mechanisms for building a profound, trusting relationship with God.
We've examined the ancient blueprints for building a life that doesn't collapse when the storms inevitably arrive. It is a brilliant, interconnected system that values hidden substance over shiny, fragile surfaces.
But understanding that the architecture of a strong character isn't the same thing as living inside it.
It never is. The knowledge is only the beginning. And there is one final provocative angle to consider before we go. When you build this kind of deep, hidden stability, when you tend your fig tree with quiet humility and faith, you aren't just building a shelter for yourself.
Right.
A fully grown fig tree provides fruit and shade long after the person who planted it is gone. True character is ultimately generational. The stability you build today becomes the foundation your children and your community will stand on tomorrow.
Which leaves us with the most vital question of this entire deep dive. Now that you have the blueprints, how will you apply this information in your life?